Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Coffee and Pan Dulce. I can't do that. We welcome everybody, and let's welcome our host also, Mr. Christian Cano. Come on in.
Hey.
Oh.
And we may have to have a special appearance today.
All right.
Bless your heart. We'll find out.
We'll listen. We'll listen.
Thank you, Miss Ruth.
You know that special guest is always welcome.
Exactly. All guests are always welcome on our show.
But especially bless your heart.
Especially bless your heart. I'm actually doing a crazy thing. My contacts, I tried to take them off because I had them on so long, so I had my eyes resting for 2 days, and I put it back on this morning, and one of them is dirty, and I can't figure it out. So I may have to do glasses, and I'm going to do an Anderson Cooper thing, where he puts his glasses on.
That's fine.
Kind of looks like. Welcome to Coffee and Pan Dulce, everyone. It is Wednesday, the 29th of May. Summer,
yeah. I can hear people screaming right now.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's just. Do you know what that's called?
Is that
A grito.
a grito?
Right?
A grito.
A grito.
A grito. We should do
It's
a
a
show
scream.
on it.
Muy bueno.
It's a scream.
It's a scream to celebrate the victory over France or Spain or something. It's really,
some Civil War.
it really comes around with it comes around with just the 6th of September.
Oh, so that's the independence.
Yes, and it's something around there because there's El
Yeah.
Grito Festival.
Well,
Yeah.
16 September is Mexican independence,
yeah.
but we also celebrate Cinco de Mayo, which is
more,
the scream,
yeah.
but it's more American.
Exactly.
That was between French and.
All right, well, let's go ahead and stop her. Alexa, stop.
Alexa wants to scream.
Alexa, stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa.
All right.
For being more obedient than my
She's gonna answer
teenagers.
you back.
This is going to be a short, wonderful week. Thank you, everyone who's watching us on live on Facebook and also on your favorite social media app. Also, those who will be watching us later on, which the majority of y'all do on YouTube and Instagram and.
Yes.
I don't know all the other.
Right.
Oh,
Show's
the
an-
other good stuff.
You probably know.
The show is an hour long. It's perfect for your workout at the gym.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So once I want to thank everyone. We're going to introduce our guests, and then we'll salute to Coffee and Pan Dulce. Or let's salute to Coffee and Pan Dulce first. I forgot.
Why can't we introduce and then they salute?
All right. Well,
Where's your coffee at?
I left it on the counter.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to go get the counter
He's
because
going caffeine free today.
yes. So today
So how are you gonna salute?
I'm going to do this.
This could be very dangerous. This could be
Here,
very dangerous.
we're not going to break our tradition. Introduce our guest. We start from our right because she's always right.
Look at this.
Always miss it.
Mrs. Always Right. My family, y'all better pay attention to this. Good morning. This is Ruth Perez, community advocate for the city of Charlotte here. Passionately working and doing everything that I can to bring the communities bridging in to all the resources out there. So I am always happy to have you as our guest.
I'm Christian Cano.
I'm Cade Lee, Chapter Director of March for Our Lives.
And we'll have someone do your hire.
Oh, excuse me. My name is Jeff Scott. I am a man about town, and I'm always happy to be here with these crazy people to set them all straight, so to speak, on the key issues of the day. So you're in trouble, and you're in trouble, because no prisoners today.
That's right.
No prisoners.
Just to let you know, we do have a special guest, Cade Lee, who is the outgoing UNC March for Life group.
Listen, you're grounded. Let me introduce
you know
now.
what, Ruth?
There's
You're a lot
already
better than
trouble.
this.
Already
You
trouble.
mind? Go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
Before that, let's salute.
Yes,
Salute.
let's salute to Coffee and
Salute.
Pan Dulce.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Always Right.
And our Pan Dulce today is a mixture of
Neighborhoods.
bagels and some
Bagels
kind
and cinnamon
I have
toast.
the pig there, and then I also have
We have Manolo Concha.
I have Manolo Concha. I didn't know
Manolo.
if Tara was going to be here today. So Tara, if you're watching, I have the Concha for you.
Aww.
And Barbara Bacon is not here today. She's at
She's a
dentist.
bacon eater.
And we've got her pig. So please help yourself. And if you'll introduce him while I share the show.
All right. This is, he really meant a short bio. Cade, right? Cade Lee is an outgoing chapter director of March for Our Lives at UNCC. and the soon-to-be college chair of the Charlotte, oh wow, North Carolina AACP. Yay! He is a junior at University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he is a double major in international studies and political science. When he is not in class, Cade is spending time with his dog, Georgia, but he is most commonly found fighting for social rights. Yay! He intends to run for Charlotte City Council or North Carolina House of Representatives after he graduates from UNCC next year. Cade is originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's welcome Cade.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
I've actually met Cade on a couple events, and recently I met him at the NAACP, so congratulations. I know you'll be doing some great things with them as far as outreach and reaching out to colleges. Is that going to be your new title or position? Great. So we've got 3 topics we're going to be talking about, which is one of the reasons that Cade is here. And the first topic is actually going to be a pretty serious topic, America's mass shooting epidemic. We want to talk briefly about that in segment 1. And of course, we're going to do our very, very brief NCO9 update. And then we want to talk about an issue that happened last week with one of our co-hosts, Ruth. Ruth had an experience at one of the flea markets and a small business person, and we don't want to get too deep into that situation, but we do want to talk about it today. So I guess let's go ahead and let's start off with the America's mass shooting epidemic. And I know we all have different views on, and this is really not a Second Amendment show. Right. This is really about mass shootings, because that's a different show. So who wants to start about talking about the mass shooting epidemic, and then we'll talk about the you have a big event that's going to be coming up that we want to try to promote after the show. So who wants to start off talking about that?
Well, let me ask a question first, because it's not clear to me that the term epidemic is the appropriate word.
Okay.
Right? It may be that you're seeing an increase. Or it may be that you're seeing a higher frequency.
Larger.
You could even say there are more deaths being attributed, but I think it's a little bit of it's a metaphor, really, to talk about it being an epidemic. I mean, an epidemic is a medical term, right? And it's about, and it relates to the epidemiology of stuff that's growing, and it can be growing in a, in a very parabolic way, or it can be growing in a very slow rate.
But you gotta keep in mind that kind of bring in due to a lot of mental illness as well. So
that's true.
Growing.
Yeah, but I'm just questioning the idea of calling it an epidemic. Now I can see, there's some people who talk about whether gun violence or other forms of violence or other forms of these shootings are in fact contagious.
Well, why don't we say it has growing mass shootings?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, I just think it's, and there's nothing wrong with political exaggeration in the form of swag, we've got, because politicians do it all the time, right? We've got a crisis, Trump's invoking a national emergency to sell weapons to the Saudis, right? So there's no shortage of politicians who are invoking some kind of emergency power, right? To do something they otherwise wanted to do anyway. So
how do you see it? Do you want to go first? What do you think about what's going on right now?
Well, let's let our guest sort of set it as what he wants to talk about. And then
how do you feel it is?
Well, let's allow our guest first, and then
Yep. You want to tell us how?
So March for Our Lives in general, the way that we view the mass shootings in this country is through like a nonpartisan lens. We're talking about how we really, it's you don't have to be pro-gun or anti-gun, but because ultimately when people come in and they start shooting, they're not asking people if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Catholic, Baptist, whatever. They don't ask any of those questions. They just come at people. And so ultimately, the way March for Our Lives views it is we all need to come together and view it as putting human lives first and putting human lives kind of above party lines and making sure that people actually address the issues that there are an increase in mass shootings in this country, and there are more and more people dying because of gun violence. And so specifically, we talk about, increasing background checks and doing extreme risk protection orders to make sure that people that might be dangerous to themselves or others can get the weapons taken away for a period of time. But also we focus on things like suicide risk referral protocols, and so making sure that like the mental health aspect of this, because it's always a conversation that's had after mass shootings, is did the person have a mental health issue? And so really trying to get, and that's what we're pushing for right now in schools, especially in North Carolina, is increased counselors, psychologists, and everything to make sure that, you know, anybody that might have something that might be perceived as a mental issue, mental illness, it's addressed in schools. And so I really think that across the country we need to take a holistic approach and stop talking about, you know, how people want to perceive the Second Amendment necessarily, and just talk about overall people are dying and what we can do about it.
And I agree 100% on that. And as a mother and as a grandmother, I go a little bit deeper, a little bit further, besides our Amendment 2, which is the marketing, the sales market out there, where they're inducing our kids into those Mortal Kombat, all those video games, promoting more gun violence, promoting how you can become the hero and killing your whole little village by being the best shooter. So that's, to my feeling, that's creating more violence between our communities, and it's not a matter of colors, but it is a matter of lives. You know, because at the end of the point, I mean, they don't realize if you're white, black, or yellow. I mean, they'll just start shooting without thinking, because they want to become that special hero. They want to leave a history.
So, this topic has come up before on the show, and sometimes we conflate gun violence with these mass shootings, right? And so they don't necessarily go together, because pretty clearly the problem of gun violence is mostly people, you know, homicides with guns, handguns, and also suicides, which are, I think, half of all suicides come from handguns. So, you know, it's not clear to me that there is any kind of I hate to use the silver bullet, right, for solving a complex social problem, right? We got a complex social problem where there's
an epidemic.
Well,
I'm waiting to get to me. I'm patiently listening.
So let me. I just wanted to comment on what he said, and then because I don't like that conflation of sort of the normal course of crime in the country and around the world, where people are using guns or they're using other forms of weapons to do themselves harm and to do others harm, because we live in a violent world, and the United States is a very violent country, right? So it's not clear that we're going to change that comprehensively overnight. So maybe we need to think about the world a little different. Anyway, let me hand it over to Chris, because I'm sure he has some things to say.
Well, no, I mean, I understand, and that's the reason I wanted to kind of let everyone know that this is not a conversation about Second Amendment, because often it turns into that type of conversation. I wanted to keep this more on the mass shootings, gun safety, however we want to talk about that, because I felt like maybe that's an area we could find a little bit more common ground, because you and I have debated this issue many times, and I'm sure we will many more times.
And we have agreed that we know that states themselves have powers to make some regulations and limitations.
We have different approaches to it. When we debated, I had suggested the liability gun insurance approach, where a person who owns a gun has to have liability gun insurance to purchase the gun, which I felt like would reduce the ability for a person to buy multiple guns, because they wouldn't be able to afford the liability insurance that goes along with it. Plus it would save taxpayers money on what happens in a disaster like this, which would also more than likely force businesses, hotels, restaurants to keep people from bringing guns into their restaurants because of the cost of liability insurance that it would cost them. So it would not violate anyone's Second Amendment rights. You have every right to own certain types of weapons, but you have to be able to afford the consequences if something unfortunately happens. The taxpayer should not pick up the tab because of a mass shooting. So that's kind of how I was approaching it, because I didn't want to approach it from the Second Amendment type of thing.
Right.
But I will say, and there are many people, specifically Moms in Action, maybe your group and some other gun safety or gun reform groups, that they do believe it's an epidemic. And so I looked up the term definition for epidemic as you were speaking, and you are correct. The term epidemic basically says that it's a widespread occurrence of infectious disease in a community at a particular time. Well, there are many people who believe that gun violence is very similar to something like that, which is why they want the CDC to be able to track. The CDC used to track gun violences, but the NRA's lobbying efforts had it stopped, and we're trying to get, or I support congressional members who would like to put that funding back in so we can track. We can't even track gun deaths with the CDC. And that has been stopped. So I always support congressional members or congressional platforms that want that done. So those are steps that and so there are many people who believe it is an epidemic. I would not disagree that the use of the word epidemic is more of a political term to, because but I don't know that it's for them, it's a very, very serious issue, and they need to use terms that are very serious.
That's true. So there's two issues there. One is we can sort of exaggerate the language to get people interested, and that's okay, because that's just marketing. Yeah. You're trying to get your political views across. So I've got no problem with that. And then there's the question of whether the medical profession should really sort of be involved, or the CDC be collecting these statistics. I mean, what we're talking about are crimes, right? And so we've got states that are responsible for, tracking the crimes, felonies and misdemeanors and all kinds of things like that. Clearly there's the FBI that's also trying to collect national statistics on these things. So we do know there's reasonably good data out there about what's going on, and this has been collated. And so the question becomes, well, does it really rise to the level of epidemic? I guess we don't really need to focus on that word, other than the fact that that the mass shootings have other interesting features. Like the shooters themselves. And when we talked about this before, I mentioned the case that I had grown up with, which is Charles Manson. So if you're familiar with the Charles Manson case, I think you want to keep that in mind when you're thinking about mass murders, mass deaths, because he was kind of a cult leader and a cult figure, and a lot of these shooters also have characteristics of feeling isolated, alienated, not being heard, rejected, but wanting to be known, and so that's a feature that they have in common. And so you can use some medical terminology like contagion to describe that. The fact that some people see that, what was Dylan Klebold, that he said some things that a lot of people, future shooters, have read, right? And so
it's like leaving a legacy to them.
So they do believe that they're getting, they're finding some, as disgusting as it sounds, that they're finding some recognition, that they're not invisible, that they
become immortal.
They're not isolated.
Ruth, Mike, I'm going to hold what I'm going to ask you because I want to hear more of what you have to say. But I also want to, and we have these kind of conversations a lot, which is why I'm so excited to have you here, because we don't often have younger get neighbors here at our table, and we're usually talking about issues from our life experiences, which are a little bit older than you are. And one of the things that I have noticed about your generation, and you're probably on the end of the millennials, if you're still you're the new one.
I'm right in between generation. What is it? Generation Z.
And millennials. Okay, so you're like I was.
So young.
No. So like I'm kind of similar to you in that I'm between baby boomers and millennials. I'm Gen X.
Right.
And we're kind of like that lost. Everyone pays attention to baby boomers and millennials. No one really listens to us Gen X people, even though we are rocking. We are the coolest ones.
We're the best ones.
Yeah, we're the best ones.
So I'm told.
We're the Kavanaughs. I don't know if that's a good explanation. But one of the things that I've always thought is when we're talking about things, and I know I respect Jeff's views because they're always very consistent. I know his libertarian values. I've tried to do some educational libertarian things, and I know that his where he's coming from. Our beliefs are from the libertarian views, and it's not that it's not. It doesn't change often. I mean, they grow, but it doesn't change often. The basis behind that doesn't change. But I do think on this issue, and maybe Medicare for all when we get to that issue as well. I do think on this issue, this is an issue that I think that all parties, regardless if you're a Republican, Democrat, Green Party, Libertarian, there comes a time where you just have to put how we feel about the issue and just listen to the youth. If the youth tell us we have an epidemic, we're scared, there's shootings in our school, I'm afraid. We as adults have to say, I hear you. We have to, I think we owe them to not give no, that's not right. The bless your heart, the bless your heart thing.
Bless your heart,
but
you're
we
scared.
Said, I'm sorry, honey, what you feel is not right. That's the Charlotte bless your heart kind of
That's
attitude.
Right. You're jumping under a table.
And so and I don't have children, you have children, and you have children, and I would think, because I think I'd be the perfect parent, I would think if my child or someone comes to me and says, hey Dad, I'm concerned about this, I'm this. I would hope that I would say, that is your concern, it's a valid concern, I hear you. Now, would I agree that that's actually it? But when the youth are stepping forward and saying, hey, listen, this is a situation that we are really, really concerned about, it's almost as if though do you think we listen to them enough? Or
it's going towards the youth. Like yesterday I read in the news where at Harding High School, they shook a guy, one of the students, and a gun fell off him. He had it on his waist. So something that is getting out of hands is through our youth.
Yeah. Okay. So let's step back in time. Let's go into the way back machine once again to the early '60s. So the early '60s and the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War. I grew up in a neighborhood where at least one family built a bomb shelter, right? And so I remember walking down into this bomb shelter and seeing canned food and stuff like that. And I also remember drills as both a kindergartner and a first grader and a second grader of basically going under your desk. So basically, the fire alarm wasn't just leave class to get away from the fire. The drill was get under your desk because there's going to be some kind of horrible event. So there is no doubt in my mind that created a lot of anxiety for young children. And if I had the power to invoke Mr. Rogers at this point, and try to comfort children about, we're parents, we're here to protect you, don't worry about that bad stuff. It's too hard to understand. Then I do that.
So that's where you're coming from.
That's where we do that.
Because you feel as if though what you would like to do is to
create a safe space for your kids, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to grow. We're trying to allow our kids to grow up free from these anxieties. And as my wife used to say, let them be kids.
Okay, so, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate because I think it'll be a more interesting show if I can throw a little wrench in here.
Because he kind of looks like the devil sometimes, right?
So, Cade, tell us how you feel and how you think, because you're sitting in this spot, you get to represent all the kids. And I mean,
all the millennials.
Speak for all the children in the world.
You're
the representative.
How does that make you feel?
We are the children.
To be telling us this is an issue that's important to you, but then you have adults that are saying basically, and I'm exaggerating only because we do this with Jeff, but Jeff's not meaning this, but to say, It's not as bad.
I'm
Just-
so
Yeah.
mean.
Don't, you know.
Well, that's what he
chill
really
out.
meant.
Yeah, I know.
Imagine, he
but-
took us back
but
all the way to
how does that-
1960.
How does that make you feel?
Right. So I think I'm just at the age where I didn't grow up my entire life with these lockdown drills. So it started about
Oh,
halfway
wow.
through my education, and so around middle of middle school is when I started. We had the lockdown drills and everything, but we've had the people that are 16, 17, 18, 19 they've grown up the entire time with
Yeah.
it, and so they have all these drills where they're having to get under desks and everything else. And I think the difference is that now it's now saying get under your desk, hide in the back of the room, don't say anything because someone's going to come in and end all your lives. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is that there's a lot in March for Our Lives. Actually, it awful timing, honestly, but it was the day before the UNC Charlotte shooting. They released a video, Generation Lockdown, where
Wow.
there's a little girl that came into a workplace and taught them and explained what it feels like she was probably 9, and what it feels like from a child's perspective to have that. And so I mean the people they started crying and everything else but that shouldn't be what it takes to make people act, because ultimately making sure that either there are more mental health checks or more background checks or anything that can potentially reduce it. And I know that I had a really good conversation with Braxton Winston about this and he said that we have a huge there are so many laws regulating where you can drive, how you can drive, and there's that double yellow line in the middle of the road, and you feel like it's a wall. He said that you don't want to go over there because it just feels wrong moving over to that side. But and that's because there's so much regulation, there's so much legislation that's saying you can't go over on that side, you can't have that, and you're going to get penalized if you do something like that. And not only that, there's so many laws that just regulate roads in general. But it's the same problem. We're so many people are dying from gun violence, and yet people don't want to regulate anything regarding that.
Okay, so once again, we're talking about mass shootings, right? Where some people are dying, and they're dying in a horrific way.
Yes.
And you're conflating it with gun violence, where people commit suicide and there are homicides, and in some
So
cities,
how can
in
we
some
regulate
cities, in most major cities, there's the equivalent of a mass shooting every week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
What would it take?
so
Yeah.
that's so you have to put this in perspective. Now, it sounds very callous to say, that lightning kills more people than mass shootings. Okay, it sounds very callous to say you're far more likely to die of a fall than from a killer. Okay, in a mass shooting. So we need to put risks in perspective, but we can't continue to conflate the real risk of mass shootings, which is very low, with the real risk of gun violence and suicides and homicides, which happen in our major cities, including Charlotte.
Almost every day.
So those are two different issues.
Yeah.
So let's address what you said, Jeff,
Okay.
because what you said is correct.
Yeah.
But let's also understand what people do as a community often happens. So what is happening right now with the response to mass shootings and gun violence is not any unusual than what we usually do when deaths are occurring. So when you say
That's right, terrible deaths.
So when you say lightning kills people, so what do? We tell people don't stand under trees.
Bring awareness.
We bring awareness to it. We tell people if you're on a boat, make sure your cleats are not tied up to other boats because so there are safety measures that we have started to teach people to prevent lightning strikes. The other example that you used, what was the other example?
Well, falls.
Falls.
People on ladders.
Yeah. So when those things happen, our natural instinct as Americans, or just as people, is to try to prevent it, to bring it to zero. So the response to mass shootings and gun violence is not any different than what we would normally do when we want to bring things to zero. And so I don't think it's an overreaction to it, especially considering the amount in comparison to most civilized nations.
Right, right.
We do have a responsibility to try to bring it. Now we're not going to bring it to zero,
Right.
but we are
Lower
going to try to do everything we can to bring it down to. So we need groups like him, Moms Demand Action.
Right.
people
No, I'm
who-
not.
yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with
Okay.
that. I'm just focusing on the fact that in the case of
Sure.
these mass shootings, which are
Yeah.
horrific,
Okay.
you know, because we sort of agreed at the beginning that we're
Mhm.
talking about a comprehensive
Yes.
solution.
Yeah.
It's a complex social
It is
problem.
very complex.
It has to do with the personalities of the shooters,
Mhm.
perhaps the medications that they're on.
Mhm.
I hope Big Pharma doesn't demonetize the
Sure.
podcast for saying things like
Yeah.
that. It has to do with the fact that the media
Mhm.
covers it in a certain way.
Yep. Mhm.
And it has to do with the fact that the people themselves are very isolated. So we're looking at all of those factors, weighing
Yeah,
those,
influence.
and saying, you know, can we pull?
Mhm.
Can we? Even the way schools themselves
Sure.
Mhm.
are organized.
Yeah.
You know, I think the latest news on the Parkland shooting was, I think, on the cover of the New York
Mhm.
Times for like, I don't know, 15, 16
Sure.
days, something
Mhm.
like that, and that was partially due to the students, right?
Mhm.
So it got a lot of coverage, and you know, there is some evidence that the coverage of these things
Mhm.
actually induces other
Mhm.
mentally deranged
Okay.
people to come to the fore. So if there is a shooting, there's like more than a 50% chance
There'll be another
that
one.
there'll be another one
Yeah.
within a few weeks. So there's a lot of I don't want to say social culpability,
Sure.
but there's a lot of culpability,
Mhm.
and we can start on all those things.
Sure.
We don't have to focus on the actual weapon itself. As you know, I've told you before,
Sure.
I'm not actually a big gun guy,
Sure.
right? I mean, members of my party are,
Mhm.
members of my campaign staff are. I mean, nothing's worse for me than sitting around drinking some bourbons with
Mhm.
them, and then all of a sudden they start talking about guns, and I'm just like going, well, let's go talk about something else, you know,
Exactly, yeah.
because sometimes it's just not that interesting to me, right?
So, the way I'm listening to every point of view of y'all, just the same, and I do agree with you, just the same way how we bring awareness to different things that have happened.
Mhm.
Every single mass shooting should alert us as a community to kind of organize and bring more awareness and bring more shops,
Mhm.
bring more conscious to what's going on, because we're not going to be able to lower it, we're not going to be able to stop it.
Right,
We're
we
not
can't. We don't want to create more isolation.
Correct.
We don't want to create the groundwork
Mhm.
and the we
And
don't
also-
want to ferment future shooters.
Yep.
Right.
Something that you just mentioned, it came to my head right now, the medications.
Yeah.
We're having a big problem with doctors
Mhm.
where they're prescribed, like I myself got prescribed
Mhm.
steroids not too long ago. And he actually did them, it's auto refill.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Then I went back to the doctor. He told me, "Oh, you no longer need them. You're fine."
Yeah.
Well, I keep on getting texts from my pharmacy
To come pick up
to
your
come and pick
prescription.
up my prescription.
Yeah.
So that allows me, if I would be a bad person, that would allow me to
Yeah.
go get my prescriptions and start misusing my drugs.
Well,
Yeah.
I you know, this is a conversation that I think every family is having one way or another, and everyone has different opinions. You know, as
Yo, before you leave,
Yes, go
before
ahead.
you go on, let me acknowledge all of our visitors, all of our watchers right now. Tara Long, she's being connected.
Thanks, Tara.
She wants us to let Cade
Tara.
talk. Please.
Yes.
Also, Mayela.
No, just me. It's all about me.
Ricardo, Luis, everybody that has connected, thank you. Please share our videos and put your inputs. If you have any ideas, any comments, feel free to type them in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so all I'm saying is that as a Democrat, my platform was and will always be to make public spaces as safe as possible. I don't believe that invades on anyone's ability to own a gun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that your gun overrides my ability to have safety. So I believe public spaces. I believe anywhere there's, and I mean hotels, restaurants, anywhere that I believe that those places have every right, and they do have a right. They're just afraid to do that because of backlash from people who are Second Amendment people to say no guns allowed in this place, which is why I believe gun liability insurance would help them be able to say, I'm sorry. In the hotel business, one of the most often lost and found items that we had were guns. People would leave handguns in the drawer next to the Bible. They would forget. They wouldn't lock them up. And there were only 2 hotels that I managed that actually said, make sure you lock your guns up in D.C. because we had so many police, law enforcement, and so forth. So I'm all about city council, all forms of government doing everything they can to make sure that we are not in an environment where someone has a gun. So that's me. Yeah. Now, I don't want people walking around in the grocery store with open arms, or things like that. That's just me. What are y'all asking for?
So specific. I mean, we're asking for increased background checks to make sure that there's actually the time for these people to have a thorough and both
age?
Increase as far as what was that?
And the age?
The age, yeah. So I think that comprehensively, really just looking at making sure that there are as many obstacles, not for responsible law-abiding gun owners, but obstacles for the people that really should never have been able to get their hands on a weapon. So either and that can take a holistic approach from increasing mental health checks, increasing a little bit longer waiting period, any of those things to make sure that ultimately we impede the person that might end up being a shooter to get those weapons. And I mean, I know that right now we've been talking to county, and I know that CMS here in Charlotte, they have just, instead of increasing funding for student resource officers, they just increased for school counselors. And so I think that's a really important step too, to make sure that, especially getting to the youth, is making sure that there's an outlet for these people. Because ultimately, I mean, I think that it's like 1 every 2,100, or 1 counselor per every 2,100 students now in schools. And it's ridiculous because ultimately, if if these students do have a perceived mental health issue, they have nowhere to go with it. They have no one that's actually addressing that issue. And so I know that there's a lot of people, especially after mass shootings, that want to focus on mental health issues. And we never, they'll say that, that you can blame it on the mental health issue, but then they won't make any changes to mental health initiatives. And so, but I want to touch on the response after mass shootings as well, because I know that in most cases, there are some, but the reason that these keep happening is partially because the changes, we've had these for years, we've had them since Columbine, and it's really the changes that should be happening are not happening across the board, especially even at a local level. Just putting in, we've had so many meetings the past couple of weeks with people saying, oh, well, this is Raleigh's problem, oh, well, this is Congress's problem. And if you don't take up the mantle and you actually address it in your community, especially in Charlotte where we just had a shooting, to actually address this issue and say, this is what's happening, this is what we're going to do about it. We just have, there's so much apathy now after mass shootings as well, and people have gotten so used to it that they'll address it, they'll talk about it, they'll mourn for a day, a week. And then
thoughts and prayers.
And then don't forget.
Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers.
And and I think another thing, I know you mentioned the personality of the shooters earlier, and I think that I do agree that we need to look into, and that's some of these studies that have happened in like New Orleans, they focus around, looking at the background of these individuals to make sure that, there are markers in specific communities to see, which portions of the community might be at risk for either being victims of violence or being the ones perpetrating the violence. But I think that the media also does an awful job after mass shootings focusing so much on the shooter, because it's and I think that it's kind of a sick curiosity that the American public has of trying to figure out, just wanting to know necessarily. I understand wanting to know why the person did it, but the focus really should be on the victims and the society that created that person, because ultimately these people, for the most part, there are some, but for the most part, these people don't just suddenly just pop up and
So what are you asking for the city council to do, county commission, and the state and Congress? What on those in 30 seconds?
Right.
Because we're running over.
Right. So locally, we're really looking for. We're proposing an education program, specifically the NAACP, is to make sure that we identify issues of conflict resolution and make sure that especially from in schools, instead of focusing on state and national that can regulate storage laws.
So getting the city to help with a program like that, or CMS, or is that just something?
Yeah, so we're going.
So I'm confused though. That NAACP
is partnering with them.
Is partnering with. Okay,
yes.
But okay.
Yeah. So
We'll ask after the show. Question.
Well,
to get educated.
I mean, let's just state a flat fact here that the shooters are young white guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I can't speak for the NAACP, but because I've been to the meetings and as a member of NAACP, I do know that the local chapter here is very concerned about many issues that touch Black and brown communities.
Right.
And this is an issue just like immigration or issues that they have really taken it upon themselves to speak about. Because no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
And so I admire the fact that, especially Minister Mack with the current president of NAACP, Kareem, yes, and that they have stepped up.
She's felt that even though African Americans are not as bad, have not committed the mass shooting, she feels the pressure or the responsibility of bringing awareness and bringing that space, the safe space for. To educate our white community, to make sure that they understand.
Well, understandably also, because we live in this, I'm not.
The African American community has a lot of gun violence.
Right.
There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
Okay,
but personally,
but from the point, yes, that's right. But from the point of view of the mass shooting,
sure, I understand.
It's mainly an Anglo thing.
But I would think that as the brown part of the
we
the
haven't
black
had
and brown,
any either, but we would love to get more better awareness of it.
But I think the reason that I'm concerned about mass shootings and so forth is because it seems we have a very apathetic voting bloc that after these shootings happen and go, yes, thoughts and prayers, we don't do anything.
And nothing is done.
And then because nothing happens, gun violence or just uses of gun to fix problems becomes the norm, and as a result of that culture goes into the police culture, and they believe the way you fix the problem is to shoot people instead of talking things out. So to me, you're right, it is a whole system, but when we live in an environment where, and I've said this before, a white young kid can go into an area and shoot multiple kids and come out alive, and a whole SWAT team has them alive. A person of color has a gun and they're dead. No one takes it. So there is a concern about how we value that. And I don't know, that's why NAACP, but if we had a LULAC chapter, which I hope we will eventually have this year, the League of United Latin American Citizens, which is the oldest civil rights organization, that would be an issue that I think in that next community that we are concerned about, because the culture of guns is made, it seems like it has diminished the worth of how we handle issues.
Okay. Well,
I don't know that.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, my only difference with you on that is that I believe the culture of violence.
Yes.
Because I see what we're doing domestically to ourselves here is simply a mirror image of what we're also doing overseas.
Right.
So.
Well, I think my biggest issue with all of it is that if we had a foreign country coming in and committing the gun violence that we're committing to ourselves, we would be at war, but we're doing it domestically, and that's why the issue just ultimately it's not being
so we're going to wrap this up because and we want to have you back, and maybe we can get a Moms Demand Action person as well, and maybe
Miss Corinne Mack.
Yeah, we'd love to have Mr. Mack on here as well. But tell us briefly about this big event you've got going that we're going to help promote after this show in the next couple of days. What's the name of the event?
The End the Violence Rally.
End the Violence Rally, which is?
It's in, it's really just pushing for state action and federal action. We're doing it in Raleigh on June 15th.
June 15th.
And on Halifax Mall.
And Halifax Mall. So if you have a chance on June 15th, try to get a ride, get there. I know the NAACP
We'll be there.
and some groups, they're trying to work on getting transportation. I have made a decision to take as many people as I can in my expedition. I can probably fit 8 people. So wherever you guys are meeting, if we're meeting at Little Rock AME, maybe that could be our headquarters, and as many people who have big cars can let's make it a caravan down there and support this cause. And mainly, and this is kind of why I'm approaching this, I think it's time for us, except Jeff, to pass the mantle along on some of these issues to our youth. Baby boomers have tried, they failed. We've tried, we failed. Libertarians have tried, they failed. We still have the problem.
We still have an amazing amount of violence in the
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
So I think it's time where we need to start. We don't want to stay out of it. We're
We
going to
want
support
to support.
but it's
but
time
let
on
y'all
many
lead.
issues that we need to say, we've tried our best. Let's get your thinking and however
hopefully
we
it
can help
works.
you. And because I think there's certain issues that some of us just have to admit, I can't. We've tried this.
Now, keep in mind for June 15th, grab yourself a pen
Yes.
and text March now to 555-888. If you need
Okay.
any further information, feel free to register on that website, and you can get better information on that. And if you want to carpool also other people, it's very important for you to go up there.
So
'cause
we're going
those
to
are
put
the
this.
actions we'll
We're going to
change.
put this on our link, and we're going to
Yes.
try to promote it if we can, as much as we can, in all of our pages. We'd love to have you there, Jeff. If you want to ride with me, I
Well,
know you probably got something.
No.
going on.
Let me ask a question,
Sure.
because just as perhaps a
Sure.
segue to
Sure.
our
The
next
next-
segment,
yeah, exactly.
which is I'm wondering why there isn't a very active and vital anti-war movement on the campuses. I'm really curious about that. It's one thing to say, you know, we've been through these lockdown drills as kids, and we need to go through this, and we're really scared about a shooter coming in, so we're doing all this training. But guess what? You know, we've got 800 bases in like 80 countries around
So
the
you would
world,
like
and
to
we're-
see
and we
the
are-
same kind of movement with with war as well.
If you're concerned about violence, and
Sure.
you're concerned about who's promoting
Sure.
violence as a means of ending conflict,
Sure.
as a means of resolving conflict over disputed territories or disputed interests,
Sure.
and you believe in diplomacy, and
Yeah.
you believe in realism in the way that you negotiate with
Yeah.
people about, you know, what can I have, what can you have. You're trying to come to a mutual compromise. Then why aren't we all involved? Why don't we all have a stake in a vigorous anti-war movement? Right? Why? When I was growing up, it was the teenage liberals who were staunchly anti-war, you know, and they were
Well, maybe they'll start that on campus. Maybe this is something that will start that on campus. This
well,
particular
not when
issue,
not when you've got, you know, the recruiters and the ROTCs, and you've got the sort of the American exceptionalist
Sure.
mentality, and you've got all the propagandizing.
Well, when you
of
bring
the
that into
students.
their mind and
Well,
maybe suggest that,
well,
they
to
could
me,
probably do something.
It just bothers me to no end. But I would like to hear Cade respond
Cade,
after.
go ahead.
So I think that, and I'm sure that you'll agree in this in a way too, is that, you know, across this country, not only with gun violence related issues, but also with these, there's so much apathy. Either people don't care or they don't care enough to learn, and it's just, and that's been the issue that I've been, you know, getting people just to be involved and to be educated, at the very least, not even necessarily involved, but just educated on the issues.
Yes.
Because people don't know about, I mean, they really don't know about local government, but they don't know about all the way up the chain of command either. And so it's really, it's, you know, and for me, I'm very different from a lot of the people my age as far as I'm politically informed. I make sure that I'm, you know, for the social issues and everything. But a lot of people, it's, especially my age, it's, you know, go to class, party, go to sleep, and it's just this cycle. And you in finding people to have drive and motivation to actually address anything or even learn about anything is
Well, I hope
That's
that
kind of sad.
I hope that those who are running for office in 2019 that you're reaching out to them to find out where they are, and maybe you guys can hold a candidate forum, you know, for candidates. I don't know how maybe y'all can get with Mom Demand Action or something together and hold a candidate forum, which is our segue. Thank you for being with us. I want you here again, and maybe we can get some more young people here, and I'll do less talking.
And slap them out of their apathy.
We'll need to do that. But thank you for what you're doing. So many times when we're at meetings and stuff, we always say, God, we need more young people here.
Yes.
There's this 2040 Charlotte vision. What is that called? The 2040 Charlotte vision. And the future of Charlotte is being determined by a bunch of old Bettys.
Yeah.
A bunch of old Bettys, many of them a bunch of old white Bettys saying, this is what we need at South Park and this is what we need. They won't even be here when 2040 comes around. Yeah. We need the young people here telling us what they want in 2040. And that is one of the things that I really admire about a lot of our new progressive and not new, but we also have people who have been in office, that they are understanding that there is times when you have to pass the torch along to other generations. It doesn't mean that what they have done, we're still standing on their shoulders, but it is time that they need to step aside. I'm sick and tired of hearing you, McCall, and Harvey Gantt. I really am. Harvey Gantt and you, McCall, were able to do things during a time period they're irrelevant today. So when I hear Harvey Gantt or Hugh McCall come up here and say, Charlotte needs to, you know what, you're going to be dead in 15, and I'm just being realistic,
right?
You know, and
you
so
need to sit down and start clapping for the new ones.
That's right. And let me just say that I agree with you, and I simply wish.
Woo!
I
Cheers to that. He agrees.
Better be careful, I might pull it back. But I just wanted to add. That for liberty-minded students, they should take a lesson in this. If you're joining the Young Americans for Liberty or Students for Liberty or any of these groups that were very abundant when I was in my formative political years. And they were out and they were very aggressive. They were passing out literature and they were talking about ideas and they were far from apathetic. I don't see a lot of those groups and I don't see a lot of those people anymore. They're very small minority, and if they want to return to some form of constitutional conservatism and the way that things used to be somewhat in with respect to people's freedom. Back in the good old days.
Get off my grass!
When you could buy a beer on a Sunday.
That's right. All right, so we're running a little over, but we started late. So thank you for being here. Let's talk about NCO9. Anyone that want to talk about any updates? I mean,
well, let me just recap. So Alan and I met at the Memorial Day celebration.
Smith is a Green Party candidate.
Alan Smith, who was here last week. We did what we said we were going to do, which is go to a Memorial Day celebration in the brutal heat. The ceremony last year was an hour long, and this year they tightened it up to about 35 minutes because no one could just be standing in the sun. So we're suffering a little bit of a heat exhaustion moment here, but we were there with Tara and Barbara. And we listened. But because everybody wanted to leave so quickly, I just wanted to point out that last year, Becker, who was Robert Pittinger's representative for Military and Veterans Affairs, spoke, and I got to meet him and talk to him, and I realized what a capable person he is, and all of the issues that are very important to veterans. Of course, Memorial Day gets confused, like you said, and this is all about honoring the war dead. The best way to honor the war dead is to stop creating them. And so it's kind of difficult for both Alan and I to say hijack this moment to say we want to promote an anti-war message. So we're just trying to be respectful of the moment and people grieving the dead. but
Yeah.
but we're back on track, and we're going to be talking about the.
I
war
read
issue.
the libertarian kind of posting for that day, the Cado Institute's posting, and it was a quote from Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what it was, but I completely agree.
Yeah.
What you said. The best way to honor them is to not have wars.
That's right. That's right.
And
Especially wars of choice.
And so I do think that is an issue that. Well, I don't know if you know. Well, we had made a decision, and we will figure this out. We're going to put all for the congressional 9th district, because that's where I live, and we all live here in this district. We're going to put the faces of all the 4 candidates, and we're going to have an issue for every guest. So if you were, we'll have to add you.
Yeah.
You're our guest, and then we would have to say, does this person support it? Yes, no, yes, no. So we can start keeping track of where people stand on those issues. Because quite honestly, and I'll say this, because even though last week I promised I would not mention a person's name during the entire show, and I won't, you would think that the Democratic nominee would be 100% behind you, saying, what can I do to help you? What can I do? I want to use my platform to make sure that I'm going to be out there speaking. I'm going to get Congresswoman Alma Adams to come and join you, and this. You would think that would be if all of them, maybe the Green Party person as well.
Yeah.
But I know you guys are a little bit different on your view on this and so forth. But you would think if any of them, that would be a section. A, that is the base of the Democratic Party, the Moms of Action women and so forth. And B, this is a platform that Gun Reform Now is something that our party has already passed the resolution on. So it is saddened to me that in our 9th district, during this special election, we don't have the nominee that is openly supporting you, putting stuff like this on their website, sending emails out there. So that's really what that individual should be doing. So that's why something like that is important, so that way people can see where people stand on those issues, and hopefully we'll get that up. So 9th Congressional District, same old stuff. Everyone's still campaigning. Summer.
I got a door knock on Saturday Was it Saturday? I
For
think.
canvassing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, they were canvassing with Dan McCree. Oops, my bad.
I didn't mention it.
But I guess they went
in.
in because they saw my sign outside or whatever. But they were looking for my son. He's unaffiliated as well as me. So.
Well, then,
So they're working hard.
Yep.
They're hitting
Just
the
to
ground.
make sure to get the vote.
working.
That's right.
They're working. I think it's too late.
Yeah.
I said it already. They should have done that in the first election.
Yeah.
They think people are stupid.
Yeah.
People know they did nothing at all the first election. You can't reinvent yourself in one summer when you have no base. You can't suddenly invite Alma Adams to your events when you completely ignored her the last election. They have an event tonight, and Alma Adams is speaking, Congresswoman. They're trying to get her involved in the campaign, so that way they make it sound like, oh, we care about black people. We care about this.
So there's nothing wrong with campaigns, sort of playing catch up to try to cover things that they didn't cover before. And remember that a lot of people don't decide until the last couple of weeks.
In general elections. I don't think that happens in special elections.
Okay, so we don't know the ground rules for a special
We'll find
election.
out.
So we're kind of looking at things in hindsight and wondering, well, what kind of strategy is going to work best?
Yep.
So everyone's still campaigning.
And it's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
It's
really
like
hot.
July and August. The height of the campaign
it's who
season.
can get their base out.
Yeah.
I know you guys have a great message. I can't wait till we can organize some debates with you and Alan and invite the other people.
That's right.
And Senate
Well,
representative.
we're trying.
Talk about those issues.
Our current strategy, just to wrap this point up here, is that Alan and I and we're hoping to get either a bishop or a supporter or someone who can speak for him or someone who can speak for the party in this election. Same way with the other Dan. See if we can't get someone from his party to come speak for them. Maybe it'll be you, but we can just to come to speak for the Democratic message. But we're thinking about doing it, somewhere in South Park where we can have 4 people, and it will be Oxford style, 10 minutes each, 5-minute rebuttal, and then some question time, just to keep it tight. But we're looking for someone who could volunteer as a moderator to run something like that.
It seems like the big issues are going to be the abortion situation.
Yeah.
They'll be ruling here in the next couple of weeks about the gerrymandering redistricting.
By the end of June, the whole fair districts issues.
That and then the immigration or the to me, those are going to be the border wall. Those
Yeah.
are going to be the three big kind of issues that
Yeah.
it seems like they're running on. So what I'm going to be looking for is for the same coalition of women, League of Women's Voters, National Organization of Women,
Yeah.
Women's March. I hope they have another candidate forum. And they invite all four of the candidates to speak. I know you were at the last one as well.
Hey,
I
Gina needs to come to the show. Gina is the main president of the
Women's March.
Women's March.
Oh, okay,
yes.
excellent. And then I also hope that our Latinx community or someone has an event. Hopefully, we'll get the Latin Political Caucus.
Yeah, I mean,
by
so
then, but-
so
yeah.
we're all hoping,
Yeah.
right, that League of Women Voters and
Yeah.
the Women's March group and the Latin American
Yeah.
Council and all of these other groups who traditionally do voter forums
Yep.
are going to step forward during this special election, because there's at least two candidates who are going to show up,
Yes.
right? That's what we're hoping. All we can do is get on the phone
Yeah.
and ask them and bug them,
Yeah.
because otherwise we're just screwed. Voters aren't going to get the information they need. This is a special election. There's
Yeah.
a very low turnout in the Republican primary. We expect that there probably is going to be a low turnout, but because of the elections, and so no one knows where this is going to go.
Well, we'll see
No
what
one
happens.
knows, yeah.
All I know is that all of these people that were at all these rallies last week about stop the ban, stop the
Yeah.
abortion ban, all of these people, I will never take them seriously again if they don't hold all four candidates accountable for what they're asking.
Right.
And I know what they know. We can read between what I'm trying to say, is that if you're actually telling me that you are upset at Donald Trump or you're upset at this or whatever the case may be, then you have to be consistent, and regardless if the person is a Democrat or not, if that Democrat does not support what you're saying, then you need to call that person out just as much as you call Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the
So-
things that makes this
Yeah.
a particularly difficult issue for me is because I'm a secular candidate.
Yeah.
So I'm a pro-choice candidate, and most members of my party in the
Mhm.
state are really,
Yeah.
pro-life, and they're a little more social conservative
It's a pro-choice.
on this
You believe a
issue.
woman's right to choose.
So I
So
believe.
So you're more like Democrats,
yeah, I'm
pro-choice.
yeah.
He's
So
a libertarian.
yeah. So I'm pro stop the ban.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you
And
know me.
I
I'm a
don't like-
Democratic libertarian, so
Yeah.
I'm pro-life,
So-
but I believe in a women's
I'm
right.
pro-life and I believe
Yeah.
in the women's rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm actually pro-choice.
Yeah.
So again, as a secular candidate, I'm at odds
Yeah.
with the majority of my party,
Mhm.
not the super majority, but
Yeah.
the majority of my party. So this is even a touchy subject,
Sure.
even when you go to party meetings. And I do want to announce we've got the Libertarian Party
Mhm.
State Convention, which is in Wilmington this weekend.
Oh.
And because of the weather, we're going to have it in the surf. We're all going to just get in bathing suits. We're going to have our entire ceremony
Oh man, we weren't invited.
Ooh.
in the water with umbrellas and sunblocks. So if you see a large group of 100 people,
Yeah.
that's the Libertarian Party at Wrightsville Beach in the water having their convention.
Okay, we got to wrap this up because even though we started late, we are now over, and I value everyone's time.
Yeah.
I want to give you this button because I lost the back. This is a Moms Demand Action button that if you I'll give you a back somewhere.
Okay.
And the orange flag
Mhm.
is represents gun violence awareness. That's right, because Moms Demand Action, their big Wear Orange Day is coming in June as well, which I hope that Moms Demand Action, if you're watching this, please try to support their organization and as well, because you're fighting for the same thing as well. And that's a button that was given to me by Christy Clark before she was elected to our state, because she used to be the president of Moms Demand Action, and I wore it forever and ever. And I want to give it to you. Hopefully, I'll get another one now that she'll like. You gave your last one away.
Sorry.
Constitutional quote of the week. Who's reading that?
He is.
Okay.
Our guest.
Thank you so much.
You're 22,
He
right?
is reading 20.
Yes.
Page 31.
Was it 22? Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the terms.
All right, did you read the whole thing?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. Amendment 22, Section 1. No person shall be elected to the office of the President more than twice, and no person who has held the office of President or acted as President for more than 2 years of a term, to which some other person was elected President, shall be elected to the office of President more than once. But this article shall not apply to any person holding the office of president when this article was proposed by the Congress, and shall not prevent any person who may be holding the office of president or acting as president during the term within which this article becomes operative from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of such term. Section 2, the article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by the legislatures of 3/4 of several states within 7 years from the date of its submission to the states by Congress.
You want to explain that one, Jeff?
Well, yeah. So
Jeff's
this,
our constitutional scholar.
So this is because of Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Right.
They wanna
Roosevelt
make
did
sure
die in
Yes.
his 4th term.
Yes.
But he was a very popular war president, and Congress said nope. But so the second section of that is just the section about the states needing to ratify this within 7 years, and that's repeated in some of the other amendments.
It always makes me laugh when I hear the conspiracy things that go on before the Trump era, because before the Trump era, there were so many conspiracies about my president. I call him my president because he will always be my president, President Obama.
Yeah.
And there was always these conspiracies from Rush Limbaugh and everybody that he's trying to be king and he's trying to stay in office forever. And then there was this, there's a congressman in...
He should have stayed on.
No, I was saying I wish we would have. But there's a congressman in New York, an old congressman, that every session introduces a bill to eliminate the term limit on presidents. Does it since 77, I believe. He's been doing it. Well, because he did it, and the conspiracy people say that Obama was putting him up to it and whatever. But the reason I mention that is because when that conspiracy was coming out, remember there was a conspiracy about President Obama not being an American and he wore the tan suit. Those were the worst things that we had to worry about during those 8 years.
Well,
today, you can't go a day without just going like this weekend. We were at the lake, but I was watching the regular TV, and the president was in Tokyo, and he said, "I agree with," or no, he was in North Korea, and he said, "I agree with Kim Jong or whatever his name was." He said Biden's got a low IQ. I believe I agree with that. And it's like this guy is just so. It's just. Why? Just anyway.
People love him for that. People love him for speaking his mind on stuff like that. So
yeah, well, all right.
Anyway,
we're not gonna.
Not me.
You know,
but I understand that people love.
We're gonna end. We're gonna end on buttons. Button.
I said earlier,
Okay.
all life matters to us.
My button is I'm a gun sense voter. One of the 5 issues that I think about when I'm endorsing someone or voting for someone is where they stand on gun reform and gun control. Even though I did endorse Jeff Scott in the last election, he didn't meet that 5th one, but he met 4 of them, and so. There are people that I
was being graded on a
yeah,
curve.
That's right. So that is still a very important issue for me for many reasons. What your button would be?
I've got 2 actually. I've got the March for Our Lives button for North Carolina and the Charlotte Strong button.
Charlotte Strong. That's right. # Charlotte Strong.
My button is the Stop Torture Now.
Yes.
And it's very important to pay attention to what the North Carolina Commission on Torture has said about the state's role in renditioning, and I hope that when you think about what our government and our national security state is doing around the world, that you spare a moment and read about the fate of Julian Assange, who is really being slowly killed in the medical wing of Belmarsh Prison.
Jeff, I have to say this. Every time you mention Julian Assange, we get postings of people saying, Julian Assange? Why are you talking about him and this? And
because he's being killed by the national security state in the medical wing of Belmarsh Prison in a maximum security prison. That's why I mentioned Julian Assange.
But I think that what that highlights is there are a large portion of Americans, A, they don't know anything about that issue, but secondly, see that as kind of like a eccentric type of thing to be talking about, as if though that's not an important issue.
Right.
Yes.
The First Amendment may actually be a relic of the past. We may not have the freedom to speak out against power. It may be that people are pressured and surveilled and killed for speaking truths about the state and the violence that the state commits around the world.
And so, anyway, I just thought that was very interesting because when you do say things like that, I always notice that we get postings afterwards. I read a post and I'm like, someone will see it later and they'll post.
I confess, freedom is eccentric.
Well, and it's also not free. All right, that is all the time we have. Ruth, we were going to talk about an incident that you had. We run out of time, but Ruth had an incident with a small business owner this last week, and it has been our latest victim of trolling, not trolling, but social media bashing. Tara has had it. I had all of it.
It was just a live in-person fracas with somebody, right? I mean, just a...
Very briefly, tell us what happened.
My main concern, I guess the people took my post wrong. My main concern was how can a business person saying he owns the whole open flea market prevents one of his vendors to sell me something that I had already ordered, it was already made, just because I parked not in a valuable parking spot for him. You know, there was no restriction. It didn't say no parking or anything. I parked right next to the vendor. He got mad. He started honking. He asked us to move the car. I moved the car, and then he went and told the vendor not to sell our ice cones. Then it turned around that when I questioned that, he inboxed me saying that that particular vendor was his girlfriend.
Oh. Who was Latina?
And she's Latina.
She's Latina. So somehow this came into on social media through
so he took a picture of my name.
This became a Ruth is pitting our LatinX community against our African American community. I don't know how.
It really shocked me because this was the first time, and that's what I put on my post. It's my first time where I see an African American mistreating a Latino. That was my, Then everybody saying, well, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, let me take this back and say, mistreated everyone, in our community.
But he was protecting his girlfriend?
No, he didn't have to protect his girlfriend. He wasn't even there when we ordered the ice cones.
Well,
it was just taking power. To me, I felt that he showed his power as being the owner of the place, where he said that for safety, I parked wrong, and that he asked me to move, which I got on my car and moved the car.
Well,
then he approached my husband, but we'll talk about it.
We'll have him on the show. We'll devote an hour.
I think there was a lot of misunderstanding, but to me the most important misunderstanding is, once again, it was a case where there are individuals that post on social media, many of them with decent and good hearts that consider themselves activists or advocates, and they usually post things on other people's postings. If you don't like what she said, I didn't like everything that she said, then just don't reply. Don't send her a private message and say, hey, Ruth, I'm sorry this is what happened to you. Some people just like to be just a post.
Send her a protection.
And it's not uncommon. So when I came to her defense, really, I started to get messages about, well, are you, first of all, anyone who knows me knows that I walk on the shoulders of so many people here in Charlotte, specifically our African American and Black community, because of what they have gone through and what they continue to do to give many of us the rights that we have. They've dealt with bless your heart racism today before I even knew what it was all about, and they still deal with bless your heart racism. And our Latinx community and our Black community will never be divided. People are going to try to divide us, and we will always make mistakes. And maybe some things that we say, but at the end of the day, we're not at that. We need each other, but there is different ways that different cultures deal with certain issues. When I see a Latinx woman, and even an African American woman, go through a situation, I am always going to err on the side of the woman, because of they go through challenges It's hard being a black woman. It's hard being a Latina woman, or just a person of color, an Indian woman. It's hard to be a woman, period. So when they're telling me something that they have experienced, I believe them. And I'm gonna err on their side because they don't do it for attention. For them to get to that point, they put up with a lot to get to that frustration.
And the worst
point.
part of it is that he inboxed me some of the stuff, and I felt threatened because he told me to take down my post because I was ruining his reputation.
So we
and then
need
he
to,
told me either take it down
Yeah.
or I pursued with charges. What charges?
Well, we need to have a show.
To be continued.
I don't want to be a witness.
Yeah.
To be continued.
We need to have a show with some members of our community here of color.
We need some mediators.
And let's talk about the relationship
I forgot
between
about
our
mediation
LatinX
that day.
and
I'm a mediator, and
Yeah.
I completely forgot. It just blew off my head.
Oh.
As a human
Yeah.
being, I mean, hello.
Yeah.
Imagine feeling the way I felt, you know,
Yeah.
just for buying a
Well,
stupid raspa.
well.
Stupid raspa.
No,
that was it.
No, but this goes back to what I say before. It is a double standard.
Yeah.
What you said was, this is how I felt and this is what I experienced, and then you have white people posting who are supposed to be champions of the black community saying, no, that's not right. That's not it. Who the heck are you to tell someone else?
I just put, this is very disappointing
anyway.
to see how Latinos get treated by African Americans.
Okay, I think it's
Yeah.
time for
So,
Alexa to give us.
We are
Next.
wrapping up the show, and I want to thank everyone who joined us. Thank you so much. We're going to hope
Thank
to
you,
promote
Cade.
your.
We have to have you soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I already uploaded your
Everyone needs to
event.
tell us where they're going to be. As I and I want to thank. Just congratulations. I did not mention that name one time during the show.
Fantastic.
I am finishing my future
Alexa,
search
play
this
Pandora.
June 1st. Hopefully, our whole group
Alexa,
will
play
be
Pandora.
ending our future search
Red Share Radio
training.
from Pandora.
That's where I'll be Saturday.
Where are you going to be?
Where? When?
Whenever.
What?
Are you going to do?
Anything you wanna promote.
What is big event is on June 15th.
June 15th.
Okay.
After that, we'll.
Okay, this weekend I'm going to be in Wilmington because the state party is having their convention, and we're going to be.
With umbrellas.
It's going to be
and the
very
water.
exciting.
La, la,
It's
la,
all
la.
about the bylaws, baby. All about the bylaws. Party bylaws. I just am so ecstatic.
Oh, I do want to say, and I forgot. I want to. This weekend is the North Carolina Democratic Party State Executive Committee meeting.
Oh.
Which I used to be a member of. They will be voting on many resolutions and so forth, and one of the most important resolutions is to form a transgender caucus. And it'll be the first time it's ever been done, and I hope everyone votes for it. I wish Janice Covington and some of our friends that are Democrats, they've been fighting for this for a long time. A lot of the L and the G's did not want this to happen because they were afraid it was going to weaken the voice of the LGBTQ caucus. But transgenders have their own. Anyway, all right, so that's where they're going to be.
You are not showing your face, that's why.
So anyway, please vote for the transgender caucus this week. I think Jeff,
Well, I'm happy to see you all at Wilmington. I'll be out there on my bicycle, riding on the hard sand. It should be a wonderful weekend.
all right, everyone say bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Cheers.